Welcome to Everything CPA and Private Equity, where we unpack the evolving relationship between accounting firms, private equity, and other strategics. I'm David Wolfskehl, a partner at Whitman Transition Advisors.
And I'm Phil Whitman, CEO of Whitman Transition Advisors. And we've chatted with more than 150 private equity groups. We've actually closed over 40 transactions with those private equity groups. And we're bringing you firsthand insights from the front lines.
And whether you're exploring your first deal, putting your toe in the water, refining your strategy, we're here to guide you with real stories, expert advice, actionable takeaways. Let's dive in. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Everything CPA and Private Equity. Love when we have guests on. And today we have Noah Beery, Head of Corporate Development for Platform Accounting, a client of ours. We've worked with them. We've seen the results and the impact of firms that decided to partner with them. And so excited to have Noah on today. And today, like every day, is we're here to educate you, to give you insights. The industry is changing quickly. And there's a lot of differences even within the changes that are happening. So Noah, welcome and thank you for spending some time with us today.
Thanks, David. Appreciate making time and having me on the podcast today.
And, one of the things that I know is different from Platform, so many of the firms out there who are in the top 50 started 2 years ago, 3 years ago, right? Platform, as we were getting ready for this, you told me is, celebrating their decade of doing this. So, obviously you're a long player. So why don't you share a little bit about that journey that the firm has taken?
Sure. So, I think the best place to start is the beginning, right? Where do we come from and what are our roots, kind of driven from, and the genesis story of Platform ties back to our founder, Reyes Flores. And, he grew up inside of a multi-generational accounting firm that was really founded around the kitchen table by his grandfather, who at the time was one of the few English speakers at the cement plant that he worked at. And, he would have his colleagues over and they would, sit around the kitchen table over a 6-pack of beer. And because of his ability to speak English, they would do their tax returns together. And his father formalized that business and turned it into actual accounting practice. And that's really the firm that Reyes grew up inside. And, from a young age, he was intimately involved in the firm, whether it was pulling files or filling the candy jar. And I think what the biggest impact of that experience on Reyes was getting kind of a firsthand look and experience into what it meant to be boutique and how that firm operated and how those kind of client and employee relationships were formed. And, this was his dad's life's work. And, in 2015, as his dad was thinking about retirement and, what was the next step for him in his career, he realized that he wasn't going to be able to do it forever. And so Reyes came back and helped his dad take the firm to market. And at that time, 10 years ago, there wasn't this kind of influx of institutional capital in the space. And so the buyer universe was relatively limited. And, some of the things that the buyers of his firm, wanted to do just didn't sit well. Was, hey, we'll take your top 20 or 30 clients. We don't need any of your staff. And, that type of approach to a boutique firm, it didn't make sense because it was going to leave the clients high and dry. And these are, multi-generational relationships that were involved in the community that his dad was in. And so Reyes decided to purchase his dad's practice. And, since then, we've executed on a strategy that's primarily driven through M&A. We've done 53 acquisitions that have consolidated into 40 offices in 14 states. And, part of how we think about approaching our firms and approaching working with sellers is really rooted in that experience that Reyes had. And so, coming from that background and having a really intimate understanding of the knowledge of what it means to be boutique and how those client interactions occur and what that relationship looks like really drives everything that we do today. And so, that's a little bit about the founding story. And, as we thought about, hey, we've been doing this for 10 years now, what's changed? And, it's really been the velocity in the market, the competitive nature of transactions. But from a day-to-day standpoint, a kind of interaction with our local offices, that remains consistent because it's rooted in Reyes's experience. And one of the things that he really preaches and we talk about on a frequent basis is how are we helping our firms get better? And that's, I think the really the North Star for everything that we do is helping our firms continue to improve, continue to address, what we think are 4 or 5 pretty key and pervasive challenges across the industry that have really, kind of bubbled up to the surface over the decade that we've been doing this. Unfortunately, we've built our firm in a way where because we have that experience and because we know, what it looks like at the local level, we've been very deliberate about building our firm to help address those as we've seen them kind of progress over the last 10 years.
Well, that's great. And thank you for that background. Now, one thing I also, before we talk about how you help firms get better, some firms might not have heard of you, right? So is there one platform accounting? Do you change the name of every firm? How do you work with that local ownership, that local leadership?
Sure. So it's been very intentional that folks may not have heard of us. And when we first got started, as I mentioned, there were no real serial acquirers in the space. And I think that there's kind of two different avenues in our thinking behind why we stayed quiet, why we were building, kind of behind the scenes, not coming and making a lot of noise and a lot of press releases. Was the first is when you're early to something, you typically don't want to attract a lot of attention to it, and two, I think that there's maybe among some of the entrepreneurs that come out and say I've got this great thing going on and look at all of these shiny things that I'm doing, and then those businesses fail. And we didn't want to be thought of as people who talk a big game but can't walk the walk. And so we wanted to make sure that we had something that we believed in and something that was, scalable and something that had a lot of traction behind it before we came out and said, "Hey, we're here. We've been doing this for a decade. We know what we're doing." And so it's been very deliberate of kind of building behind the scenes, building quietly to make sure that when we do make a splash and we do start issuing press releases, that one, the word is out at this point, and that it's no secret that accounting firms are the next kind of frontier of value for institutional capital. But two, that we've got something sustainable, and that we're going to be here for another 10 years or 20 years, and have something that's kind of enduring that we can really hang our hat on and be proud of in partnership with our local offices. To your other question, you're absolutely right. You don't see a lot of platform accounting group branded firms out there. And that's deliberate because we don't brand our local offices as platform accounting group. We will change the brand to something that's fresh, that's new, that has ties to the local community or geography. But we think part of what it means to be boutique is to have community involvement and not be misconstrued as this big regional or national presence. While we have a footprint that is national, we don't operate like a regional firm. We don't operate like a national firm, where the culture is kind of one of assimilation, and we're going to come in and dictate everything that you do and you have to fall into our model. We want firms to be able to maintain that sense of autonomy, that sense of local culture. Our firms are really run at the ground level, and I think that really starts with the branding piece. So it's a deliberate, maybe direction that we've gone from the very beginning to not brand all of our firms as platform accounting group.
And, I was in the pizzeria the other night and they had like 20 years of Little League pictures from them being a sponsor. And I think that's the kind of vibe you get when you're local. You're part of that community at a much deeper level. And it also seems like you allow the personalities of the individual firms to remain that cultural piece as well.
Absolutely. And I think that that's paramount because, you know, what we've discovered is that a lot of the clients of our local offices, they could go to a regional firm, they could go to a national firm. The same is true with the staff, right? And with the crunch of talent in the industry, our staff are getting recruited or hit up by headhunters for large regional and national firms all the time. But those people have self-selected into a boutique firm for a number of reasons. One of them being that local culture and that kind of intimate familial experience that our team members get that really translates into the client experience, right? And so if we were operating on the mantra of, hey, one platform and everybody's going to look the same and feel the same and bill the same and choose clients the same way, we think that that would really destroy a lot of the integrity of being boutique and would actually be detrimental to our clients, to our team, because that's not what they're looking for. And that's not why they've deliberately chosen a boutique firm.
And I think so often there's so many differences in the players today, the strategic buyers. And I think in many ways, people also self-select because people hear the differences and they feel what's right for them. And some people want that local independent and sponsoring the Little League is highly important to them. And some want the prestige of being with a national firm, and people do self-select. And that's part of why we do these things, so that you can hear the differences.
Yeah.
And so let's talk for a second about, you talked about you're enduring, right, already a decade. So that's somebody who's learned a lot of lessons, I'm sure already, has built a lot of success as well. But, let's talk a little bit about the cap stack, because some people are very worried when we introduce them to, so who's going to be the next owner in 2 years or 3 years? And I'm not going to select that. So why don't you talk about, how you view your cap stack and, how that impacts your strategy and the longevity that you've already experienced.
Sure. So, as we've thought about raising capital over the years, and we've raised capital a handful of times, what we're primarily focused on is who is going to be the best partner for us from a strategic standpoint. And as we think about the business, who's going to be here for the long term and want to continue to support that. And I think in consolidation and in an industry that's consolidating, there are a couple of ways that you can go about it. One is you go really hard and really fast. You don't focus on a lot of integration. You aggregate a lot of revenue, and then you flip it and you make it somebody else's problem to do all of those things. And that's one model, and that's fine. And that's certainly a way to drive value for some shareholders. The other is, and the approach that we've really taken is, how do we build an enduring business, right? And that means having to do some of the hard things, having to do the integration, having to build out a team that can support what our long-term strategy is. And as we went to market and thought about raising capital, what we found kind of overwhelmingly was that the firms that aligned best with that strategy were family offices. And, as we've raised capital, we've exclusively raised from family offices. The latest round of capital that we raised was from a group called the Sinosure Group, which is the private investment arm of a very ultra high net worth family here in Utah. And we think that it gives us a little bit of a differentiated approach of thinking and how we operate, because they have a 15-year fund. And the guys who started Sinosure, they came from Carlisle. And part of the reason that they left Carlisle was because they felt that they were selling their winners too early. And when you have a defined fund life of 5 to 7 years, you don't really have a choice. You have to realize your investments, return capital to LPs. And as we think about building the business, there are investments that we need to make that are long-term investments. Well, if you have a shot clock and you're really working against time, a lot of cases, the investor is going to come in and they're immediately going to start talking about, okay, what's our exit strategy here? That doesn't align with our long-term vision of how we think about building a sustainable and enduring business. And our capital partners reflect that. I think part of the reason that private equity has been, and I think that there's plenty of room for traditional private equity within the industry, is they're thinking, how are we going to exit and realize this investment? And we have a defined time frame in which we can do that, which means we need to make these investments now or these cuts now to maximize profitability in the short term so that when we do go to exit, we have a track record of driving profitability. I think that some of those decisions drive short-term profitability at the expense of long-term sustainability. And so as we've really kind of thought about what's the long-term view and strategy for a platform, we're fortunate because, Reyes, our founder CEO, is young, Tyson, our COO, is young, I'm young, and we're enjoying what we do, and we want to partner with capital providers that will enable us to continue to do the things that we're good at, give us strategic advice when we need it, but really be along for the ride and helping us make the right decisions without having the pressure of we need to do this now because we're going to sell in 3, 4, or 5 years from their investment.
Great. Well, thank you. And again, that cap stack has an impact on strategy. And one thing I really like about platform is the alignment of the tools, the process, the cap stack, very much in alignment, and that's great. We talked a little bit earlier about one of your focuses, not you specifically, but platform, is to help the firms that join you get better. So why don't you share some insights into how you accomplish that?
Sure. One of the things that I think maybe is unique to platform is we don't have a defined playbook, right? We're not coming to firms and saying, here's the playbook, this is exactly what we're going to do, and you have to fit within this box for this to work. We take a very bespoke approach to all of our firms, and we're actually coming to them and soliciting from them, what do you want? What is, as you think about the long-term growth of your firm, what are the things that you would like to do? And a lot of times in kind of a seller doer model that a lot of firms are kind of structured under, they know exactly what they need to do, and they know the steps that they need to take to get there. But how do you find the time to go do it when you're servicing clients, you're managing relationships, you're managing staff, you're running payroll, you're doing the IT, right? There's just not time in the day or the week to be able to accomplish those things. And where we're able to add a lot of value is we have a, team that's probably 70 people that primarily sits here in Salt Lake City that are doing a lot of the back office operations for our firms and thinking strategically in partnership with our local offices around, okay, let's every year evaluate where you are. Let's benchmark you across firms in our network, firms across the industry. Let's talk about technology. Let's talk about process. Let's talk about people. And let's figure out what are the strategic initiatives for the next 6, 12, 18 months. And then we have the resources, the firepower, the expertise to be able to go help do those things, right? So it's not a consulting exercise in that we've evaluated what you're doing. Here's a PowerPoint presentation, now go do it. It's okay, here's what we think and here's what we understand from data, from surveys, and this is what we think makes sense. Does this align with your strategic visions and the direction that you want to take the firm? If yes, great, then let us give you resources that are available at our central team to help go implement those things. And so it's not a one size fits all approach. It's very bespoke for each of our offices because they all need different things. We can probably in broad strokes categorize the 4, 5, or 6 things that they want to do, because the reality is that some of these changes have been talked about for 10, 15, 20 years. So they're not novel concepts. What we can then do is give them the resources and firepower to go do what they've always wanted to do and help grow their client base and service their clients in a way that they haven't been able to do before, which the long-term implication of that is they have happier team members. Their team members are focused on the things that are interesting to them. It creates more mobility and kind of upward trajectory in their career. And so it's really about expanding the opportunity for our team and better serving our clients through a number of different avenues that we're working intimately and kind of hand in hand with our offices to create the plan to go execute.
And, I always say the world doesn't need more ideas. The world needs execution of ideas. There's a million sales books, there's a million cookbooks, there's a million everything. It's about making it happen. So totally in alignment there. And so
Well,
I'm sorry.
sorry to cut you off, David. And these these people at our local offices and the partners who are coming to us, they've heard it a million times, right? They've gone to all of the conferences and everybody's saying, you need to go to advisory, you need to do, value-based billing, you need to do training and development for your staff. And it's almost like a broken record at this point. They're like, I know that. I know what I need to do. How am I going to do it when I've got all of these different things on my plate and I'm trying to stay above water and in my capacity and my recruiting and my technology when, I'm still trying to service my clients.
And oftentimes, the biggest book of business is also the managing partner in smaller firms. And so now they're also trying to run the firm as well as all those other things they need to do.
That's right.
So Noah, this was great. As we wrap this up, anything else you'd like to share about platform or the platform story?
No, David, I think you've hit on a lot of really important pieces as we think about, the future of platform in the industry. We think it's incredibly bright. We think there's a lot of opportunity out there. And, for, firms that may be listening and kind of tuning in here, the piece of advice that I would give is to find the firm, in the event that you're thinking about a merger or a sale, find the firm that aligns best with your philosophy, your culture, your direction that you want to take the firm. Ignore the dollars. They will come and you will have success together if you align on what's important. And as we think about it, the most important piece in any deal and any firm that we're getting into business with is making sure that we are in agreement on the direction that we're going. And if we can have that, everything else will fall into place. And so, folks that are interested and would like to have a conversation, I love meeting new people and exploring kind of the world of possibilities together. So feel free to reach out, feel free to get in touch with Whitman and, would love to meet you.
And in many ways, that's what we do, is make sure that we're connecting the right firms with the right culture. Again, people self-select. And I totally agree with you. The money will come. Spend time finding the right partner.
Yeah.
And so, well, for everybody, I hope, again, you're starting to hear there's differences. There's great people out there. Reyes also did an episode a week or two or three ago about quality in the industry. Big thank you to him as well. So if you like what you're hearing, like, subscribe. If you have a question, send us a message. We're happy to answer any questions. Noah, thank you for sharing the platform story. I've heard it many times and it's a great story. And again, it's an authentic and alignment story. And that's really critical. And you've been there and you have it. This isn't aspirational. This is, we're ready for things. So love working with you.
Thank you, David. Appreciate the time and, be well.
Thank you for tuning into Everything CPA and Private Equity. Every episode brings fresh insight. However, there's always more to talk about. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe wherever you watch podcasts. Have a question or topic you'd like us to cover? We'd love for you to reach out to us. Together, we will help you navigate this dynamic landscape so that we can help you achieve your goals. Until next time, keep making moves that matter. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.